I only have 2 experiences of high school graduations. We don't quite do it that way in England. And so only 2 experiences of the rituals that go along with American high school graduations, those of our 2 younger daughters. Both of those graduations involved trips to amusement parks with their friends. And for them, I dare say, never for me, roller coasters. Of the 2 of those events, that of our middle daughter Alison was actually the most eventful. Eventful, indeed exciting for Ali and her friend Amy, because they had just graduated after all. Exciting for us all because of the drive down to New Jersey, which is where we went to the Six Flags down there. Because Amy and Alison were both just 17 years old, and they'd never followed behind a car before, and they and the 2 young men with them were following Mike and I and our youngest daughter. They'd never driven that far before, and certainly they had never been in anything like the traffic that you get just outside New York City before. And I remember sitting there in the car and looking back as we were crossing sort of 6 lanes at one point, absolutely terrified for them. They did great. It was exciting too for the amusement park staff that particular weekend as they battled 95-degree heat and high humidity and hundreds of teenagers in long, long lines. They used hoses of cold water on them. And exciting for Mike and I in a totally different way, as we had to get up twice during that night to dig and re-dig little trenches around the 3 tents so we did not float away in the deluge caused by the not too surprising and very huge thunderstorm that concluded the day of high heat and humidity. It was a day of ups and downs for all of us. This is the final Sunday of Eastertide, the period when we remember those early days of what would gradually become the Christian Church. Next week is Pentecost. Hope you're going to wear red, if you can. The remembrance of that event at the beginning of the book of Acts, in which we see the disciples empowered for the task ahead. It follows Jesus' final leave-taking of them at the Ascension, which the Christian Church, of course, recorded on Thursday of this past week. Now, the order in which we've done this, I understand, is not being chronological. From Easter until last Thursday, the lectionary readings leapt ahead and took an excursion through the rest of the book of Acts, everything after chapter 2. So before we get back on track to what the church has traditionally seen as the original length of time between the first Easter and Pentecost, 2 events tied to the Jewish festivals, this is a time for us to consider the book of Acts and what it tells us about our mission and our faith. The book of Acts tells an extraordinary tale of the adventures that befell this relatively small group of Jesus followers as they told their stories and won over hearts and minds and souls to the ideas of Jesus. That story began with the evening of Easter Sunday. Bemused members of the group who'd gathered around Jesus, not the main 12, the names we tend to hear more of, who were still afraid and in hiding, we're told, behind closed doors, but of the larger group of followers. And these 2 are walking to Emmaus and just don't know what to make of the last 3 days. So much excitement. And then Jesus' arrest, and the mock trial, and the crucifixion. And now strange stories saying that the women were saying that Jesus had been raised. Their emotions had been on quite a roller coaster. What were they to think? Dare they believe it? Could it be true? What if it were true? Could the women be right? Did God do that? Dare they hope? Dare they believe? The tale continued, with disciples in a locked room having Jesus suddenly in their midst, disciples seeing Jesus cooking fish on a lakeshore, and then skipping past the events of Ascension and Pentecost, the story moves to these newly empowered and excited and emboldened disciples, no longer in hiding, but out and about telling the world what God had done in Jesus. Acts covers around 30 years of the